All right. Well, welcome to the DFL Before DNF podcast. My name is Josh Rosenthal from Borderlands Trail Running. For those who've been following along with season 1 of our podcast, I am the worst 100-mile runner in the country, and I'm desperate to unlock some things. And so I finished 1 out of 8 100-mile attempts, and I'm going for it again at Zion in April 13th, I think. April 11th, somewhere around there. And I'm just on the hunt for insight. And I've just reached out to some of the runners that I respect immensely in the community of ultra running. And Candice Burt responded that she was willing to join us today. So today we're here to learn more about her. And then on the flip side, to see how she's accomplished the great things that she's accomplished, but really both from business and as a runner. By way of introduction, you know Candice's races if you're in the ultra community. The first non-repetitive 200-miler she started with in what became the Triple Crown, and seeing such incredible runners and really introducing runners like Courtney Del Walter onto the national scene with her crushing victory at Moab 240. I don't even know how to begin to wrap my mind around the Arizona Monster, but it's an unbelievable race that she has coming up. She saved someone from a burning car. She's really kind of just willing to go in and take care of business. And today, that's why I'm super excited to have you. So Candice, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So before we get into some of the stuff as a runner and talking about like how to the late race survival tips, I just want to get to know you a little bit as a person. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up on Whidbey Island. That's in Washington State. So
nice.
Yeah, a little north of Seattle. We would take a ferry ride to go pretty much anywhere off the island. So yeah, kind of grew up on a small 10-acre farm, bunch of animals.
So what all were you farming there? What did your parents do?
Well, it was more just a dream that they had to kind of have a small farm, but they would commute into Seattle and work. My parents actually met as Seattle police officers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, way back in the day. So my mom was in the first group of female police officers to ever be allowed to be officers in Seattle. Yeah.
That's
so there's
cool.
actually a book out there with her name in it where it talks about kind of that first group of women who joined the.
That's amazing. Tell me more about that. What was that like to grow up with a mom like that?
I guess I probably got a lot of my adventurousness from her. I know that she wanted to be involved kind of in something exciting. She parachuted a lot when she was younger.
Awesome.
I'm trying to remember what year she joined the Seattle Police Department. It would have been probably around in the 70s, I think it was, because I'm trying to think like the early 70s. Okay. And I think there weren't a lot of choices for women to have kind of an adventurous career, but the fact that had opened up just drew her in. And
that's cool.
Yeah. And so they wanted to have a farm. They didn't want to live in the city. They wanted to raise us kind of on a farm. So we had horses and dogs and cats and chickens and
So were they still commuting into work?
What's that?
Did they commute into work still? Like as they were living in Whidbey Island and working for Seattle Police Department same time?
Well, my dad did. When my mom and dad got together, my mom took time off and she raised us kids. So so she at that time was a stay-at-home mom for several years.
Okay, nice. So on Whidbey, was there like Whidbey High School? Where'd you go to high school?
Yeah, there's actually, well, I don't know if at that time, it was so long ago, but there's 3 different main cities. So there's Langley, Coupeville, and Oak Harbor, and we were in Langley on the south end. So we just went to the school system. I went to the same school system my whole childhood.
Really? Nice.
Yeah.
And did you run track? Did you do sports? What'd you do?
Yeah, so I joined track my freshman year of high school. I'd actually been showing horses throughout middle school, kind of like my mom So we grew up with this amazing jump system in our um, 10 acres where my dad built jumps over water. We had a horseshoe pond, an arena. So I'd
Wow.
gotten really into horseback riding and 4-H in middle school. But then as high school came around, I kind of wanted to have a more social um, sport. So my
Yeah.
sister had joined track and I thought, well, that looks interesting. So I joined track, but really found more of my passion when I joined the cross country team the next year, my sophomore
Okay.
year, and just loved the group of women or well, I guess teenagers,
Right.
men and women who
Yeah.
we had an amazing community. And that kind of followed through once I graduated high school. I wanted to find that again, which I found in the trail running scene.
Amazing. So, did you run in college? Did you go to college? What happened after high school?
After high school, yeah, I went to college and I almost had a full ride because I just applied for all these scholarships and I wanted to go to a private school, but my parents
Okay.
couldn't afford it. So
Yeah.
I just applied for everything possible and then
Nice.
got, almost full ride to Willamette University, just a
Oh yeah.
tiny university. But I wanted to go somewhere small because I was from a small town.
Yeah.
And so I went for a few years, but it didn't feel right. Like I was trying to do all these science classes and become a doctor, but I was more interested in philosophy and English,
Hmm.
creative writing. So I actually dropped out, went to massage school and did that through my 20s, as well
Okay.
as had 2 kids.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
How old are your kids
23.
now?
16 and 18.
Oh, cool. Wow. Is
Yeah.
the 18-year-old in college or senior year?
Senior year. Yeah.
Okay.
She's going to
Wow.
go to Japan or Korea next year, go to a language school, and then university there is the plan. So,
Whoa. That's
yeah.
crazy. So she's got her grandmother's sense of adventure that came through you to her.
Yes, definitely.
That's awesome.
Definitely.
All right.
Yeah.
So you're massage therapist, 2 kids. I mean, when do you start to conceive of this like ultra running world or the 200 miler? Like, walk me through massage therapy to the first 200 miler that you started.
Um, I think the whole time in my 20s, I used running kind of to stay in shape. And at some point, I realized, I think when I had kids, that I was really fortunate to get any time to run.
Yeah.
And it became a little bit of my meditation to rebalance and and be a good parent.
Hmm.
So getting a little bit of time, I think, away from kids is important to
Yeah.
rebalance and come back in and be that balanced parent that we want to be. So running became more of a spiritual kind of experience. And I
Hmm.
think at that time, I heard about Born to Run,
Yeah.
and that book had come out. I had a friend I met who was in the same like kid. We all had kids,
Hmm.
and she had run 100 miler, and I was
Okay.
just blown away. Like,
Yeah.
no way. I thought, okay, I read Born to Run. I'm like, if somebody can do 100 miles, I should be able to train for a marathon. So, like, a marathon, I always thought would be something I would do eventually that would take, maybe 10 years to work up to.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden I thought, well, why not just do it? And I signed up for the Seattle Marathon. I
Okay.
think it was like springtime, and I ran it that next November. And from there, it kind of snowballed because that same group of friends were going out to Orcas Island. And this is 2010, and there's a 50K, 25K on
Hmm.
Orcas. And so I thought, well, I've done a marathon. I should be able to do a 50K on trail.
Hmm.
But boy, was I blown away at how much harder it was, like in a different way.
Yeah.
And I remember like being so sore about having had so much fun at that race and waking up the next morning. I had to roll out of bed and like crawl to the bathroom.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But I was hooked. I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Right. Right. Okay. So you did Orcus,
Yeah.
50K. And then what was next? I mean, did you go for 100 miler soon after?
Yeah, it was the next year. So that year I did a whole bunch of different ultras of like 50K to 50 mile. And then the next year got into Cascade Crest,
Okay.
and ran that. And so I was kind of on this trajectory um, toward racing ultras. At the time, I hadn't had any really breakout kind of performances,
Mm-hmm.
but I was working for a company, Rain Shadow Running, at the time,
Okay.
and so I was kind of seeing how organizing events worked and making a little bit of money through that and
Mm-hmm.
massage. And so I ended up realizing like, oh, I could probably start a race directing business myself. I kind of looked at some of the things that I saw um, through helping with that and how I could shift them and change them to work better for myself. So
Mm-hmm.
I launched in 2012 a short distance trail running series in Bellingham, Washington, where I lived at the
Oh, wow.
time.
Okay.
And I had like 10K, 20K, those kind of distances. And then that next year, I just kind of knowing that like I loved 100 milers, but I also had a love of Lake Tahoe, where I'd spent a summer back when I was in college.
Uh-huh.
And I had been signed up for the Tahoe Rim Trail. So I had this connection to Lake Tahoe. And I just thought, why doesn't anybody create a race around the lake on trail? So I
Yeah.
pulled out maps and I looked at like what was possible and kind of the rules of race directing and permitting. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, it seems possible, like if
Wow.
we do the route through here and not through there. And so my boyfriend at the time was like, well, why don't you just do it? And I thought, yeah, okay. But
It's
it
that
was
easy. Just do
super
it. Yeah.
scary.
I like
Yeah.
it.
So I had no idea how to put on a 200 miler because the longest race I'd even helped with was close to like a 50 miler. But what do you do for a 200?
Yeah.
So I just,
What year was that you're talking here that you decided to start it?
um, it was October of 2023. And so I went down to Lake Tahoe that same month,
Okay.
explored some parts of the route that I was unsure about, and realized like this should be possible. And it was early November where we let kind of the cat out of the bag,
Uh-huh.
hey, I'm going to organize a 200 miler. And I remember there was a lot of excitement in the
Yeah.
community,
Yeah.
but there was also a lot of people that were like, you're not going to be able to do this. There's no way, and a lot of pushback with people who lived in Tahoe because I still lived in Washington,
Uh,
other race directors
yeah.
and
Who's this
locals like,
person coming to our area
yeah,
and
stay
doing a
out of
race?
here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But 2014, I held the first Tahoe 200.
Wow. How many people?
We had, I believe I started 90 some, and we were
Wow.
limited. But I actually had like 100+ person wait list. I could have
Wow.
let in, I
Year
could have
one.
sold it out. I mean, it did sell out for the number we were allowed.
Yeah.
And then the next year, it continued to sell out. And we just we were able to increase numbers a little bit. But it was important to start small too, I realize now, because there was so much we had to figure out. Like, how do you organize a 200-mile race? It's just completely different than
So much.
100.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what's crazy is that year one, you already had that. There must have just been like this layer of 100 milers that were dissatisfied. They had proven all that the 100 miler can give them and wanted to go a little bit further, right? I mean, there's a Salt Lake guy, Stephen Jones. Was he a part of that first year?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So Stephen Jones always told me, and he would talk to anybody who would listen about 200 milers.
Yes.
I'm going to do the Tahoe 200 forever, for as long as I can. It's my favorite race.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he was a part of that whole initial group.
He made a statement. So I didn't know him. His brother-in-law, Matt Bergstrom, who's worked a lot of your races. He's one of my best friends.
Oh,
So
cool.
Steven's
Yeah.
sister is Kathy, Matt's wife. And at one point, Matt passes along to me something that Steven said is that that 200 milers are the next 100 miler. And here
Yeah.
I am back here struggling with trying to figure out the 100 miler. And I hear that and I'm just like, oh my God. I mean, but the guy was a beast. And, I also hear that did he have an influence on the Moab 240 route? He was a part of
Oh, yeah.
scouting that with you.
No, so he died before it ever came to existence,
Okay.
the route. So he had been sending me, I feel like it was for years, like this. Once he realized he was passionate really about 200 milers, he made a route in Moab that he said, this needs to happen. It's an amazing route. Moab's an amazing place. And I had never been there, so I didn't really know, but I was overwhelmed at the time with the events I was organizing. And by then I had two 200 milers. I had the Tahoe 200 and the Bigfoot 200.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's enough.
Yeah.
And so you'll have to excuse my dogs.
Dogs are welcome here.
Okay. Nobody minds a little dog in the background. But yeah, so he was sending me routes on Cal Topo back in at least 2015. It was probably 2015. Yeah. And then he died in an avalanche in early 2016. And at that time, we were all just shocked and saddened, and it was unbelievable, to lose somebody like that. And it kind of made sense at that point to look back at his map, as a way of memorializing him. Yeah. And the original route was almost exactly what he had created, which is pretty cool. I mean, there's certain things that you have to change.
That's really cool.
Yeah. We've had to change start location, but generally speaking, we have, that same single loop, 240 mile route.
Once I have evidence to support that I belong at that starting line, that's definitely a bucket list race of mine. Do you, if that sort of respect for Steven wasn't there, did you have another route in mind for that ever? Or was it just like when he passed, you thought, this is the route, and you're kind of, that's going to be it indefinitely?
Well, originally I told him, there's not enough single track. I'm not interested, but I didn't realize at that time that a lot of those areas like that he had mapped out are really rugged. So they're pretty much single track. But people will sometimes take side by sides out on them. So once I went out, after he died, and I went out, I'm going to just check out Moab. I'm going to check out his route. I realized it was an incredible route. Like, it was an incredible area. And I shared kind of his passion for that once I realized what he was talking about. So I would have never done it if he hadn't planted that seed in my head, because I had enough on my plate. Plenty to do.
I bet. Yeah. So I've worked the aid station, I believe it was like mile 168 or something like that. 1 year, my friend Jeremy Cox was the aid station captain there, and I came with my kids and spent a day as like first, second, and third came through. And it just, for anyone who hasn't, we've been to a 100 miler, crazy inspiring. 200 miler is just this other level of what in the world is going on. Like, even as someone who's like obsessed with the 100-mile distance and loves it, when I was there watching a 200 miler happen, it's just like, it's probably that initial feeling that we all got when we first heard about 100 milers. It's like, what? The guy coming into 168 was just so fresh. I mean, it's just unbelievable what's possible. And so I'm wondering then, now transitioning into what you're trying to do with Arizona and the Monster, has there been a layer at the top of the 200 milers where they're like, hey, we want to go further? Or is this something that, is your 300 mile race satisfying demand, or are you trying to cast a vision for going further? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be a certain demand to go further with events. But for me, it's always about the route. And if the route isn't amazing, I'm not going to just do a certain distance to hit that mileage. I just wanted to feature Southern Arizona, and kind of like the Moab 240, it ended up being 240 miles, not 200. So we try to make the race no junk miles, no long out and backs, unless it was absolutely necessary for an aid station. But this route, I started adding up all the mileage, and I was just like, oh man, trust me guys, I don't want to organize a 300 miler.
I can't imagine.
But the route is just something that we it just has to be 309 miles to get from point A, to point Z.
Yeah, right.
But at a certain point, we're going to hit, and I think 300 miles is kind of that point where the cost of entry, the cost of organizing the event, the cost of having staff for me, it just becomes kind of crazy
That's
after.
absurd. Yeah.
Yeah, after a certain mileage. So I know
Do you have
people
a
want the
date?
500
Oh, sorry.
miler, but it's
Right.
like the cost of that, it would be insane.
Yeah. Do you have a date set for it yet?
Yeah, we picked it's kind of that first week in April. I don't remember the exact dates. So Garrett, my race director, is working on
Nice.
all those permits right now, but I think we submitted kind of for, it's a full week, the cutoff.
I can't imagine that just the
7
logistics
days.
process of the permits alone. It just
Oh
feels like
yeah.
a beast. So.
Yeah, I had to fly him out to Patagonia to do town council meeting where we're gonna have the start in Patagonia, Arizona, an amazing little town that the Arizona Trail goes through. But he had to meet with the town council and bring these papers and have this presentation. And they're excited about it, but there's been a lot of work going into it. And I've been working on this course for close to 5 years. Actually, I've been wanting to put it on.
Wow.
So people don't often realize, like, you launch a 200 or 300 miler, but there's usually like a very long span of time that you're actually working on that event for, and you're not paid.
I can't imagine
spending money on it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so it's obvious at this point to the listener and viewer that you're ambitious, and so on top of everything that you've accomplished, from raising 2 kids to all the 200 milers and all of your, I mean, we've talked about 200 miles. You've got a lot of other races that aren't 200 miles, and this Arizona Monster,
right? Yeah.
And then in your spare time, we're talking the world record that you set this year, and this is where I kind of want to transition into talking about that, and also like giving me advice as I try and unlock, lucky number 9 as I finished 100 miler, DNF'd 7, and looking for insight from anywhere, from people who've done really hard things. I mean, you ran 200 days in a row. You ran an ultramarathon every day, right?
Yes. Yeah. And the minimum mileage that I was allowed to do was 31.1 miles, but I ended up trying to get as close to 32 as possible, just so I didn't get somehow the GPS read lower or.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. Yeah. So you were having that monitored by what, Guinness or?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of a process where during the world record, I'm gathering a lot of evidence based on what they need to prove that I did what I did. So during the runs, I'm gathering the evidence, but I wasn't submitting till I finished. And you can't turn it all in till you're done anyway. But I could have submitted had I had time as I went along. I see. The days were too busy. So I've actually been submitting since I finished, and I just completed the final 5 days. So just completed as of today, uploading all the information.
Wow.
So all I have to do is hit that button. I have no idea how long it's going to take them to go through.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's taken me though, since May all the way till now with my, slow upload to get all that information.
Wow. And I mean, day one, you're super excited. Like I guess where I'm ultimately going and with my questioning is 200 days. How are you feeling at like day 95? You know what I mean? Like, is there despair at that point? Is there still just optimism, or like, help me get inside your mind a little bit. How do you think this massive effort being at the halfway point and knowing that you still have 100 more days or whatever, like what's going through your mind?
Well, I think one of the keys to my success on this was that I didn't really pick a final destination. I started out with an open-ended idea that I was going to do a lot. And to me, a lot was at least 100. And at that time, I didn't let anybody online know what the goal was. I just wanted to, because I knew that like my body could just suddenly say, nope, we're done. and
Right.
I might have to listen to that. So I had submitted to Guinness on October 30th. I said I was going to do 100 days. I knew
Yes.
I could change that, but that was like, I had to look back because I couldn't remember what number I had picked at that point. But as I got closer to 100, it became just so normal. Like the number that I had done still seemed low.
Mm-hmm.
And the marathon consecutive days of marathons record was at 106. But
Okay.
I'd heard about this woman doing 150 in Australia. So
Mm-hmm.
now your mind just starts thinking about these things over and over. And so by the time I got to 100, I knew I was going to try to beat the 150.
Okay.
And technically that it doesn't count. Like I won't have the marathon record. I can only take one record, and that's the ultra record.
Oh,
Um, but
interesting.
but I still wanted to like do
Yeah.
more than the
Yeah.
marathon because we're ultra runners. That's what we do.
Right.
We do more.
Yeah.
So I just picked 200 eventually because I knew before 100 I was probably going to go to 200 because I wanted to kind of represent what I've done with my race directing. It seemed like a good number. I'd be
Yeah.
done the day before the kids got out of school for the summer. It
Oh,
just
nice.
seemed right. But I still didn't know until I got probably until April if I would make it. You just anything can happen.
Right.
But that at day 100, I was just on this, or before 100, I was on a high for sure of
Yeah.
like I was feeling better than ever. I was feeling stronger. I was running faster. I was running more consistently. But
Amazing.
once I crossed that 100 barrier, it was like mentally things just like tanked.
Hmm.
And the next 100 days would be so tediously boring overall. Like that's
Mm.
overall. The mental challenge of the next 100 was so hard. Whereas the first 100 was so physical and I was
Mm.
excited about every day. But then I
Mm.
realized like I could probably do this for more than a year. And now I'm in this like middle zone where there's no end in sight. It's like the middle of an
Hmm.
ultra.
Exactly.
But I'm so stubborn that I was not gonna stop
Yeah.
until I got to 200.
So, I mean, is that your, let's say, special sauce, like the stubbornness? Like you're just like once you set your mind to it, there's literally no option to stop.
In this case, yes, because um, I was just so, it was so important to me. I realized this was a chance. I'd gotten so far, I wasn't going to give up those
Yeah.
100 days because I was not feeling it or bored all day for days and days and weeks. I Stubbornness is something I've always had, and my poor parents. Anytime that I had a goal or I wanted something, I would never let it go,
Mm.
like a
Mm.
pit bull,
Yeah.
just
Right.
hanging on to it.
So,
So yeah,
like,
to me in
okay.
this case, it was just so important. I'd put
Yeah.
so much into those first 100 days. I'd sacrificed so much. I wasn't going to give
Mm.
up all that by stopping.
A brief aside on that. I mean, it's not like your businesses are, you know, they're in-person events. Like from a business standpoint, maybe you can have certain like online businesses or whatever that can be cruise control. You can have fulfillment happening in this place and marketing can be automated here. You're putting on these insane heavy lift that require a lot of people to execute. So you've got these your business is going to how, I mean, I guess, how are you engaged with destination races during your world record attempt?
The whole time, every day I would call Garrett, our race director, and
Mm-hmm.
have a conversation with him about what needed to be worked on. He would ask questions. He was fairly new to race directing at this
Mm-hmm.
point, the company as it was full time. He's been with Destination Trails since 2014, which is pretty
Mm-hmm.
cool since the first 200 miler.
Mm-hmm.
But he was doing like course marking and stuff like that, just very part time. So I took him
Mm-hmm.
on full time around, what was it, 2021, 22. And so I was really needing to walk him through all the different stuff and the permitting and everything. But I was
Okay.
able to do a huge amount of that over the phone. So
Nice.
I would start my run, I would call him, and I would be huffing and puffing and we would just go through, all the stuff that needed to be worked on that day. 7 days a week, I talked to him.
Yeah.
So we sometimes it would be 10 minutes, sometimes it would be 2 hours. And as I ran, I would lose reception, have to call him back. But I would call him at least for a little portion of every day to see how everything was going.
So you're juggling that. You've got kids, but it sounds like you're running while they're in school. I mean, what time of day were you running?
I mean, it varied a little bit overall, but usually I would start the run after they would go to school. Sometimes I would start before. And again, they're older, so there's no way I would have done this if they were, in like elementary school or something like that. But they're both in high school. One of my daughters drives.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I would usually start around the time they went to school and then finish before they got back. Although, some days I would start a little later and finish later. It just kind of depended on factors. One day I had driven out and my daughter texts me and says, I might have left the hair straightener on in the house. And I was like, almost at the trailhead to start. Drive all the way back home, check, it wasn't on, and then go back out and do the run. So stuff happens, and sometimes you start a little late.
So as I really start to kind of tie this in and even tie it up a bit, like I think, you've got some of the stuff that works against me sometimes, is all the stuff that I'm juggling between business, between family, and my kids are now 4, 7, and 10.
Okay.
So training, I want to be a good partner to my wife, and these things start to get in the way, and what I mean by that is like I prioritize them sometimes over my ambitious desire on the trail. You have so much in your mind, like you've got, like I said, the races and all this. Is there is there a moment in that world record attempt where you were like, you know what, this is my goal and I think I should stop, but you decided to keep on going? Was there ever a moment of doubt, like day 150, 160, or was the hay in the barn at that point?
Yeah, I think there were days of doubt the whole way. Usually based on like a really severe pain that I might be having at the time.
I guess we didn't talk about that.
Yeah. The first month was very painful, but I had pelvis pain that lasted like 5 months, and I would have a day where I would just get super worried, like, is something wrong? Should I stop? Do I have a fracture in my pelvis? And then I had recently kind of posted in my stories on Instagram about how my lips I had blisters on them for that same amount of time too, that were horrible. And I couldn't eat certain foods.
Really?
Yeah. Hank's coming. But yeah, it was tough. There were days where one day I called up my friend Adam, who was kind of my sounding board, like Garrett, on a regular basis. And he answers the phone, and I go, I just start bawling because my pelvis hurt really bad. I didn't know if I should keep going, and my lips were horrible. Just totally open sores, I'm thinking, is it cancer? Like, what's going on? There's so many fears that can come up. And he goes, I'm in a car with a whole bunch of people right now. Let me call you back. And so I'm like still crying, and I hang up, and I'm like, okay, you know what? It's just me. Like, I have these people I can call and all this, but I have to suck it up and get it done. And I just sucked it up. And I think he called later. I was like, I'm okay now. Everything's okay. So I had
I just needed that one moment.
Yeah, I had to keep checking into like the moment I was in. Is everything okay now? Instead of going into the anxiety of,
gosh, that's great.
The fear. Yeah. So I think that's what happens to us in ultras. It happens to us in life when we get caught up in, oh my gosh, where is this going? Instead of being in that moment where everything is okay now. And if I stayed in the everything is actually okay right now, I could keep going. And that's just how it built on itself. It snowballed into something really big. but it started as something just really small.
I mean, that's absolutely like aha moment for me of like, yeah, because I'm my mind is busy and thinking and like I just like you said, like I feel this, this pain in my hand. It's like, oh my God, they're gonna have to amputate it. It's but it's like in this
Yeah.
moment, it's okay. It hurts, but it's okay. That's really
It's
interesting
letting
thought.
it's letting the emotions come in,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge them, right? Oh, is this going to need to be amputated? But then you control the emotion by just letting it go through.
Hmm.
Nope, that's just a thought. It's okay, let it
Yeah,
go. And if
everything
you
is
hang
okay
on
right
to
now.
those fears, that's when you start thinking about dropping out and
Yes,
quitting and
that's
taking
exactly
that
it.
pain away.
Yeah, yeah. Like m- I could go through each DNF and be like, yeah, here's what happened. Here's what happened. A lot of it, I mean, there's a few like perfectly justifiable from a physical standpoint, but there's a handful that are just like mental weakness.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a super helpful one because I'm playing out a movie that doesn't exist in the world yet, but that movie that I'm playing out is always a horror film, and it's never
Yeah.
like a rom-com or something like that. So I feel like that's, to me, like one of the brilliant takeaways from our conversation is everything is okay right now. Like that's it. And then I'll check back in 10 seconds, and just
Yep.
maybe have to keep telling myself that everything
And
is okay right
and I
now.
think too, as parents, we can look at like, yeah, this race sucks right now in this moment, but I have all this time to myself and I'm not going to let that go, and all the sacrifice I put into training, the time away from my family.
Yeah.
This is my time
Yeah.
to do for them what I've put out and set out for myself. And so when I go race now, I see it as this privilege to get to have this time that's all my own and utilize that time. Is there anything I'd rather be doing besides hanging out with my family? Like, yes, I'd love to hang
Yeah.
out with my family, but I already sacrificed all this training time, so I'm not going to waste that. And I'm going
Hmm.
to complete this race, um, not only for myself, but for them, in that sense. Because, as I get older, it does, I think, matter to them, your experience as well, racing.
Yeah.
And when you end up DNFing or quitting, it's hard on the whole family.
It is. Yeah, because then once everything's like calmed down and I'm back to normal a few days later, it's like, well, Dad, you did all of that and you didn't even finish, and you could have. Like,
Yeah.
I think so. I
you
think
and
so.
you have to be okay
Yeah.
walking it in a 100
Yes.
miler. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of us get in this mode of like, I'm gonna have to walk 40 miles.
Yeah.
I have been in the top 10 and had to walk for a huge number of miles, and it's humbling,
Yeah.
to get passed by people, but at the same time that finish is always worth, um, humbling yourself. That's what we do in hundreds. We aren't really these superheroes like people see
Yeah.
us as. We
Yeah.
really have to humble ourselves
Yes.
to get to that finish line.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I went to UTMB this year just for fun. I wanted to see the American men finally cross in first, and in
Cool.
my mind, like that's how I want my finish to be. And it's just like as Jim's coming or Zach's coming down, like that's never going to be my experience, even close. And in some ways, making peace with like, it's great. I mean, it's an unbelievable accomplishment to run a 100 miler, but at the speed I run it, it's not going to ever be in the news. And so to be okay with this unbelievable accomplishment as just being for me. And in the end, that's why I keep coming back. Even though I'm an outrageously competitive person, it's so funny because in that context, I'm the least competitive person that you'll ever come across, like in terms of actual times. So
Yeah, and competitiveness doesn't isn't just, front, middle, or back of the pack thing. Or it's not
yeah.
just a front of the pack thing. In fact, there's lots of really talented runners who, if they were a little more competitive, could do even better.
Mm,
But I think part of the reason I've had success is because I am very competitive, but I've
yeah.
had to work on, the speed part, because there's plenty
Mm,
of people that are way faster than me, but
yeah.
I care so much, that I'll put in all those extra days or
Yeah.
that extra effort during the
Yeah.
race that,
Yeah.
less competitive person might not put in.
Yep. Well, Candice, I want to honor your time and thank you so much for joining me. I think a lot of the ultra trail running community whose ambition goes beyond 100 miles up to 200 miles has you to thank for sort of paving the way on that. And it's been really cool to watch such a successful company, Destination Trails, and your world record attempt, and now the Arizona Monster. There's just I just love the ambition. I love what you're bringing to the community, and I hope someday to be worthy of standing at the starting line of the Moab 240. I'll get there, and then maybe we'll see again.
Yeah, and I want to say, because you've said a few times that maybe you're not ready for 200 or deserving of it, but I think for a lot of people, 200-mile distance is more doable than the 100 because you get more time. And the food is usually better. So, I mean, that alone, if the food is better, that's a selling point. But and really,
sleeping is acceptable, right?
It's acceptable. Yeah. And you have more time to fix things and kind of get going. It's just a more enjoyable experience because you aren't having to rush from aid station to aid station. It's more social. It's a slower pace. If you want, you could go faster if you want to. But you just have more of a spectrum of enjoyment possible in a 200-mile race. And I got to experience that for real when I went and did a 200 in Australia. I realized, like, even at the front of the pack, I was able to have a little more time to do everything. And it was just so much more fun and enjoyable in that sense. And you're not necessarily going to be more beat up either, because again, it's not like you're running really hard for 100 miles. You're kind of toning that down slightly over 200. So it's not as intimidating as it sounds. And I think you're ready. I think you would like it better than a 100-miler.
You might. I've always thought that in the back of my head, especially since my buddy Jeremy's aid station was a sleep station as well. I always thought, I don't know, if I could get 8 hours in the middle of something like this, maybe. Okay, I'll think about it.
Good, yeah. But don't rule it out as something that you can only take on once you get to a certain point or finish a certain number of hundreds. But for people interested in the 200-mile, just be sure to look into, like, what's the cutoff? Is that because some of them are tighter than others and more difficult. With ours, we definitely try to cater to middle and back of the pack in terms of time cutoff. So always look at that, because you don't want to get surprised when you've made that much of an investment in training and race entry and all that. Yeah.
Well, when we see the Arizona Monster registration come online, we'll definitely support it and push it out there to our people. I think my followers at Borderlands are prime candidates for that. So, and I can't wait to see what that looks like, because I love the Arizona desert.
Oh, it's going to be amazing. I mean, I haven't been this excited since the last 200-mile race I launched, and it's definitely time to get a new event out there. You know what's crazy is there are so many people excited about this new 300-miler. I did not expect so many people to be. So we have a Facebook page, and in 24 hours, we had 1,000 people join it for the Arizona Monster 300. Wow. So I think I don't think we'll have any trouble filling it up, but who knows?
That's I mean, it just speaks to, like, if your first race had been a 300-miler and never done the 200 stuff, it's and then you'll do the 400, you talk about it logistically, but it's just like the season of 200-milers that we've had, the 10 years or whatever. Now there's people that are, like, seeing what's, a human body is capable of, and we want to keep trying. So that's cool to serve it up to them.
And there's going to be people that never do a 200. They're just going to jump. They're just going to jump right into the 300-mile thing. I guarantee you, because that happened with 100s and 200s. We have people doing 200s that have never done 100.
Okay, so interesting.
You definitely don't need certain ultras as stepping stones. I think it just depends on the person's mentality. It's not necessarily a bad idea, but a 100-miler is almost a different sport altogether. 50K, 50-mile, 100-miler. When you get into 200s, it's just totally, totally different.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think you've convinced me. I'll talk to my wife. Awesome.
Awesome.
Candice Burt, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's a real honor to get to talk to you, and congrats on I guess you'll submit the world record, but it seems looks like we're good to go, but either way, good luck.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I appreciate you having me on. And I hope all your audience at least considers these super long distance races, because I think they are. If you love an adventure, it's more of an adventure than a race for sure.
I love it. Okay. I think I'm in. All right. We'll talk to you again sometime.
Sounds good. Bye.
All right.